Hey all, welcome to my channel. Today I'm just going to talk about the finale of Succession. I waited quite a few towards the end of the week to give those because I didn't want to spoil it. I mean, those are probably voting news and such, but I might as well talk about it now since it's a week's gone by anyways, practically. It was interesting how the ending went about. Basically, seeing as how basically if again for those who haven't watched it, unfortunately, spoilers will be spoken about here and there. So if you don't want to listen to it, then you can stop the video at this point. But in any case, the weird question was is like with how the Roy kids, I guess you would call them, with um, Kendall, Shaban, and Roman were pretty much all set in place to essentially give ownership to fully to or have basically Kendall be the one that runs the company. To the point where it was like Shaban basically was trying to push in the earlier, prior episode, as well as earlier in the episode, for her to be the U.S. CEO of Waystar after the buyout from Gojo would go through. But in this case, when we find out later that basically Matson basically was essentially looking to replace her. He just used her as bait to get access to the president or president-elect, so that he can actually, have access, basically have access to him, so that smooth things over, so that the deal can go through. What the funny part was is then Shaban was definitely played. Quite honestly, that's the sad part about it. Shaban was played, and she realized it, and she was pissed off about it. She only realized how badly she was played when basically Tom comes up and tells her it's basically him. Now, my initial thought was I thought basically Matt was playing Tom as well too and screwing around with him. But in reality, if you see some of the earlier scenes, Shaban was basically saying when he's asking about Tom, Shaban's like he'll do whatever you want, basically ass kisser, bootlicker, etc. Basically, and that's what Matson wants. Basically, he needs someone to basically to go with what he says and does. Going with Shaban would always argue against him or go against the grain, basically, similar to anyone else for that matter. And that's what he was afraid of. He needs someone that he needs to be that puppeteer. And you see in the cover magazine with Shaban basically sort of it looked like the roles were reversed, where she was the puppeteer and he was the puppet. Matheson was the puppet, and he thought that was funny. But in reality, a man with that kind of ego, in this situation, Mattson was equivalent to an Elon Musk, and they both have egos. Elon Musk has an ego. Let's not forget about that. But in this situation, this guy had an ego, and even though he says, "Oh, it didn't bother him," in reality, it did bother him, of course. And so, as a result, he was secretly exploring other CEOs for the American CEOs or U.S. CEOs for Waystar at that point, still owned by Gojo as a multinational corp, basically, and as a result, you could see Shaban basically sort of giving all the positives about Tom for being with ATN, but in reality, giving also the positives from what he wants to hear and see, Matson wants to hear and see about Tom being CEO, the U.S. CEO. Shaban not realizing it, of course. And that was pretty funny at that point. And as a result, in the ending, you see basically Shaban basically going against the grain, realizing that Kendall. Actually, I don't know why she felt Kendall should not have had it, but in reality, it turns out she didn't want to. She didn't want to. Either it was more of a case where she knows her role will always be the female, and she'll never have access, similar to what her mother was, and like all the other women in Logan Roy's life, they wouldn't have access to the Waystar company or enterprise, basically. So it was a case where I think she had, those doubts came about as a result of realizing, this is not going to work for me. What's the purpose of it? Now, if I with Tom, at least I'll have, maybe I could be sort of a side puppeteer as well, too, in a ways. So you'll have Matson on one end, and then she could have the other end, basically. And think of it this way: is more of even though Tom Wambsgans is the U.S. CEO, she can technically be it where he tells her stuff and she just goes and says, "Don't be an idiot. Do this, and this," basically. And Matson probably would, like if that ever happens, he can just replace him. But in reality, I know she'll probably be the good wife and just sit on the sidelines basically at that point. Um, so as a result, we see basically the final scene with Tom and Shaban basically in the car, and we see the successor is actually Tom Wobscans, which is a surprise. It is Tom. I don't think anyone of course the producers and writers knew about it, but I don't think I saw Tom coming out as a leader. Honestly, I thought maybe possibly as a remote possibility it could have been Greg, because he did put Greg in there. Logan's Will. He put Greg at the last minute. But in this situation, never once did you see Tom in any of this stuff, basically. So it was pretty funny, like how Tom came out of nowhere, left field, being the successor at that point. And so, with that, you see Kendall then going to the park, walking as a result, seeing that the ocean was representative, like, this is what Waystar could have been. I was groomed for this. It was within his grasp. And the fact that it's this vast potential that he could have brought with Waystar, but he can't do anything about it. And all he can do is observe from the sidelines at this point, which is pretty impressive. And then, of course, you got Roman basically as a start of the series to the end of the series. You see him in a bar basically, and knowing full well that he's just going to be playing the playboy basically, and like, you know what, I can't do anything about it. I mean, reality, they're all rich at this point as well too, because of the way, Gojo Waystar deal. They get their billions. So it's a possibility, like Roman and Tom and Kendall could probably try to start something else on their own basically at that point as well too. But I don't know. Who's to know at that point? But the other factor is like we also see Greg, where you see Tom basically telling Greg, like in the first season, I've got you. I'll take you under my wing basically. In this case, Greg is under his wing. Of course, Tom messing with him constantly. It's like a pain in the butt, but at the same time, it's humorous at that point as well too. So that's pretty funny at that point. It would be interesting to see how Greg, if let's say if there was a season 6, or season 5, if there was a season 5, basically you'll see Tom, with Shaban basically giving him advice, and he was going against the grain at that point as well too. That Manson would replace him and use Greg at that point as well too. That'd be really funny if that would have happened. The weird, interesting part is like coming from that, you see that, as Tom was named successor, basically after they signed, Tom was named successor. You saw Carl and Frank pretty much thinking about, once the sale was done, they were like going to be pretty much done. But now they know that they have Tom. They're like, you know what? They could stick around a little bit longer, and they could actually mold him or sort of shape him in a ways. Basically, it's more of a case where like everyone around basically can shape Tom to be whatever they want him to be, what they want him to be, basically. More of a case where like just Tom is not a guy that has that assertiveness to be that CEO, so he'll just listen to others and let others dictate what should be done at that point as well too. So you see Carl and Frank thinking about it and talking about it, and then of course seeing Jerry as well too, being the fact that like she was pretty much out, but brought back in based on Tom keeping her as part of the crew basically, and like leaving it as such to the point where like you have the 3 old guards staying in place as well too with them basically at that point. And so it was from that, it was pretty funny to see that with Greg, part of the new guard staying on that border as well too. What the interesting though part is like Connor. We don't know what happens to him. He's like pretty much just left in the wind. He's like a nobody practically. It seems like he's just sitting there. Or last scene we see him basically is them all watching a video of their father. Logan Roy basically, and that's it. And it's pretty funny that we all see him, and then that's it. And after that, we don't hear anything else about him at this point. I mean, last thing we know is Shaban saying like, well, you might not be the ambassador based on what everything is going on with the court and so on, all that stuff. So it was pretty funny to see that and seeing his reaction. But after that, that's pretty much it. You don't see anything else after him. And so like I was kind of curious, was like, what just happened? What's his role going to be? Is he going to be doing anything or not? It doesn't look like, surprisingly enough. It's just like he's just it seems like his role in the show itself was pretty much just there. That's it, just there. He had no specific role whatsoever, to be honest, at that point. And it's interestingly enough, if you see the in the footer basically that I see right here, so like if you see basically the reflections, you can see that Shaban is basically always behind Tom on one side right here, but then if you look here, she's also behind him here. And it's kind of weird. It's like, from here, it's like, why is he in front of her? And then why is he in front of her here? Shouldn't she be in front of him here and he be behind her? So they're like saying, like, okay, so she's always going to be behind him. And then the other factor is if you look at Logan's wrist, you'll see the watch. That watch, remember, was given to him as a gift by Tom. So it's possible that the writers of the show and such were pretty much giving us clues like who was going to be the actual successor. The fact that it was never going to be Kendall and it was never going to be Roman, as well as never going to be Shaban. So it was pretty funny to see that at that point, honestly. And then you could actually see basically Greg looking at Tom, basically, and like, pretty much being there, looking at Tom and Shaban, basically, and just sitting right there and like checking him out at that, and that's pretty much it. So it's kind of interesting at that point. And I don't know. Put it this way, I was somewhat satisfied with the finale, but yet still some unresolved stuff at that point as well too. And you could see also the evolution of Kendall becoming like his dad, about to do what his dad did, basically with what Logan did with Connor's mom. Basically, it's like, I'm going to keep my kids. I'm going to do whatever it is to keep them and get rid of you, like put you in the mental institution or create some negative publicity against you, and so that he gets full custody at that. And then you see he's going for full custody for his kids, basically. Shaban, it'd be interesting to see. It was the one thing that I was pretty interested to find out though was the fact is like I thought we already knew the elder child, she was adopted from Kendall. I didn't realize the youngest one was also not biologically Kendall's. When Roman basically said when Roman said it, I was like, wait, what? That threw me off. I had no idea. Basically, so in reality, Kendall's ex-wife was essentially either one, unfaithful to him and already slept with someone, and this is someone else's child, or two, he married her while she had a child. But it looks like, based on the fact that the way that, or three, he was adopted, but the way basically that, or the fourth one, which is what I think may be the case, which is probably the case, is basically what the way Roman said it was like a form of filing cabinet. It sounds like more of a case where like they could not conceive, so the child was done through what's that called, artificial insemination, or IVF, whatever it may be, with a via donor. It seems like Kendall probably had issues and so forth, and that's why the kids are not his, essentially, and that's why they probably adopted the second one around. So that was interesting, and that's probably the reason why Logan was never really close with those grandkids, because I'd be kind of curious to see if Shaban had given birth by the time Logan was still alive, would he focus on that grandchild versus Kendall's kids? I think he would have, because I think he knew full well that these kids are not his part of his blood. So he's like, why even bother? But Shaban, bloodline, he probably would have pushed her into that at that point as well too, or Roman. I think that's why he was pushing for Roman at that point as well too. But with that, I'll leave it at that. Again, please leave your comments in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts. Do you wonder also what happened to basically Connor, as well as do you think the I guess the whatever the filler logo shows that hey, it was a precursor of what they actually thought it was going to happen. Did you enjoy the finale? Do you think it resolved a lot of things, or do you think it opened up more things at that point as well too? Just leave it in the comments, because I do read them, of course, when I do get prompted or notified about it, and I do respond to them when they warrant a response. And also, if you do like my video, like my content, or like my channel, please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. And if you don't like my videos, like my content on my channel, but still watch it just for to get riled up or something like that, then you're welcome to still subscribe if you haven't subscribed. But with that, I'll leave it at that. Unfiltered, unedited, and unrehearsed. Until next time.